Amid the fierce waves in southern Australia, there is a hunt as dangerous as it is valuable. Abalone, a seemingly lifeless shellfish clinging to rocks, yet each one can be worth more than $100. To bring this living pearl from the icy seabed to lavish tables in Tokyo or New York, brave divers must trade sweat, skill, and even their very lives. The hunt for sea pearls. Amid the fierce waves. In southern Australia, where the horizon seems torn apart by foaming waves, there exists a livelihood that is as harsh as it is adventurous, yet few have ever witnessed it firsthand. People often speak of mining, of endless wheat fields, or of international trade routes, but few realize that a silent economy is operating right beneath the icy ocean. There, amid the white foam, divers become warriors, not carrying guns, but armed with oxygen tanks and hook knives, stepping into the hunt for a treasure that seems lifeless, the abalone. This is not merely a job, but a test of human limits against nature. Day after day, divers face the dark abyss where great white sharks lurk, razor-sharp reefs, and sudden waves that can sweep away a life in an instant. Every plunge into the water is an unspoken contract with death, trading each breath for a chance to bring back sea snails worth their weight in gold. A successful harvest season can bring in millions of dollars, but to reach that figure, they must gamble with health, endurance, and extraordinary courage. What makes the abalone hunt so remarkable is not only the brutality of nature, but also the way humans turn challenges into strength. A diver is not merely a harvester. They must have sharp eyes to spot each abalone hidden beneath seaweed, a keen sense to read the rhythm of the waves, and above all, a steely will to remain calm in moments between life and death. Behind every heavy net bag rising above the surface lies not only spoils, but also the mark of another victory, over themselves, over the ocean. Yet this hunt cannot be separated from the currents of the global economy. Abalone is not only a delicacy in Asia's finest restaurants, it is also a symbol of soft power, of connection between a remote Tasmanian coast and the refined dining tables of Tokyo or Shanghai. A sea snail clinging tightly to the cold seabed can travel halfway across the globe to become delicate sashimi, or be steamed in lavish banquets under dazzling crystal lights. It is a miraculous transformation, from nature to economy, from a wild seabed to trade negotiations. In truth, seen from the lens of political economy, the abalone diving trade reflects a familiar principle. The greatest value often hides behind immeasurable risks. Just as U.S. financial markets for decades have faced crises, recessions, bubbles bursting and rebuilding, Australian divers endure cycles of danger and reward. Both must learn to read signals. One interprets the flow of capital, the other the undercurrents of the sea. And both know that even the smallest mistake can sweep away everything achieved. Here, economics is no longer dry numbers, but the frantic breath under a diving mask, the quickened heartbeat in the darkness of the deep, the fleeting moment between life and death. It is an economy written in sweat, in heartbeats, in the scars on a diver's body. And that is what gives weight to every kilogram of abalone brought ashore. For they carry not only monetary value, but also the memory of sacrifice. If in Washington people debate trade policies, tariffs, and agreements, then in the waters of southern Australia, each diver writes their own survival policy. They have no air-conditioned meeting rooms, but the ocean itself plays the role of a harsh negotiating table. They wear no tailored suits, but cold-soaked diving suits. And every return with a net heavy with abalone is a blood-and-bone signature on their contract with the sea. Thus, the abalone hunt is not simply a seafood harvest. It is the intersection of nature and humanity, of survival and commerce, of danger and reward. It reminds us that in any economy, from the seabeds of southern Australia to Wall Street in America, Success has never been free. There is always a price to pay, and only those willing to face the risks can touch true value. The value of a sea snail. If the abalone hunt in the southern seas of Australia is a symphony of danger and survival, then the economic and culinary value of this seafood is the enchanting final resonance, carrying it beyond the limits of a harsh livelihood to become a symbol of luxury and soft power in the culinary world. Abalone, in the eyes of gourmets, is no longer a rough sea snail clinging tightly to rocks, but a pearl infused with the flavor of the ocean, capable of reaching the wealthiest classes in Tokyo, Seoul, Beijing, or New York. What is fascinating is that its value does not come only from rarity, but also from the cultural story hidden within each fiber of flesh. In Japan, abalone, or awabi, has long been present in traditional ceremonies, even regarded as an item that brings fortune and blessings. In Korea, chicken soup with abalone is seen as the essence of recovery, a symbol of health and prosperity. Meanwhile, in China, the image of abalone is often tied to the extravagant banquets of the elite, where the value of the dish lies not only in its flavor, but also in its affirmation of social status. A single abalone on the table is enough to elevate an ordinary meal into an experience of power. Therefore, abalone is not merely food. It is the crystallization of status, of culture, of the aspiration to touch the finest essence. When a businessman in Shanghai invites a partner to eat abalone, it is not only an invitation to enjoy a dish, but also a subtle signal of respect and prestige. When a Michelin chef in Tokyo serves abalone sashimi, it is not only refined slicing techniques, but also his way of bringing the Southern Hemisphere ocean into the diner's taste experience. Placed within the perspective of political economy, the value of abalone is also a vivid testimony to the shift of global consumer power. Just a century ago, abalone was a local dish, brought home by fishermen to feed their families or traded in small exchanges. But today, as the middle class in Asia explodes, the demand for abalone has surged, turning it into an essential link in the international seafood trade chain. That rising demand makes each kilogram of abalone represent not only flavor, but also trade balances, hidden negotiations on catch quotas, conservation policies, and marketing strategies. On another level, abalone is also a story of trust and transparency in the market. Consumers are willing to spend hundreds, even thousands of dollars for a meal with abalone, because they believe it is the authentic product from southern Australia, where harsh nature creates superior quality. That is why each abalone is tagged with a QR code, allowing customers to trace its origin, harvest date, and preservation process. This is proof of how technology and modern markets intertwine with culinary traditions to build lasting trust. But perhaps what makes abalone become gold beneath the sea is the intersection between scarcity and desire. Nature does not bestow abalone abundantly. They grow slowly, taking many years to reach commercial size. That very slowness creates value, as each abalone is likened to a long epic of time and the sea. And thus, every slice of abalone that a diner lifts to their lips is not only a delicate sweetness, but also the taste of waiting, of nature accumulated through years. Looking more broadly, the journey from the cold seas of southern Australia to luxurious dining tables in Asia is a kind of new Silk Road in the 21st century, where goods are not merely products, but cultural experiences, affirmations of economic power. Abalone does not travel across deserts like silk and spices of the past, but across icy oceans, escorted by preservation technology, traded by global entrepreneurs, and finally celebrated by the culinary world. Thus, the value of abalone does not stop at the figure of $100 per snail. It is a symbol of how humanity transforms a small creature into a product tied to culture, economy, and even global politics. It reflects mankind's eternal aspiration, the desire to elevate the finest of nature into the standard of luxury and power. And in that world, abalone is not just a dish. It is a declaration. Cold seas and the challenge of survival. If the value of abalone is determined by the luxurious desire at the tables of the elite, then the foundation of that value lies in the harsh natural conditions where it grows. Southern Australia does not grant abalone with ease. On the contrary, nature here builds walls of challenges that turn the path to this treasure of the sea into a spectacular escape from the cruelty of the universe. And it is precisely that harshness which has created a unique flavor while also forging a special class of divers, people forced to learn how to live with danger as part of their profession. Imagine an early morning on the coast of Tasmania, when thick fog covers the water, icy winds sting the skin, and the air temperature barely exceeds 5 degrees Celsius. Beneath those white-capped waves lies a dark, cold ocean, where the water temperature rarely rises above 10 degrees Celsius. For the human body, this is not just ordinary cold, but a penetrating chill that stiffens every muscle, making each breath heavy. No matter how thick, a wetsuit is just a fragile layer against the freezing currents flowing straight from Antarctica. And in that setting, the diver descends, carrying an oxygen tank and faith in themselves, as if stepping into a forbidden realm that nature never intended humans to enter. Beyond the cold, the reefs of southern Australia are a dangerous labyrinth. They are sharp as razors, capable of tearing through the thick fabric of a wetsuit with just a scrape. Long seaweed coils like invisible traps, and with a single careless moment, a diver can be entangled, lose orientation, and panic in the dark. On the surface, waves may appear majestic, but on the seabed, they transform into fierce whirlpools, capable of sweeping away a body struggling to stay balanced. Each dive requires the diver to read the language of the water: when to advance, when to retreat, when to pause and wait for the whirl to pass. This is not only a skill, but a survival instinct forged through thousands of encounters with death. Yet the greatest threat beneath the waters of southern Australia is not just the cold or the reefs, but the giant creatures guarding the ocean, great white sharks. This is one of the regions with the densest population of great whites in the world. Every time a diver bends down to pry an abalone from the rock, they are aware that in the distant darkness, cold eyes may be watching. An unusual movement, a trace of blood, or simply lingering too long underwater may be enough to turn them into prey. That is why divers must always keep their minds sharp, moving decisively yet silently, like travelers walking on the territory of colossal predators. And yet, in this seemingly impenetrable setting, abalone grows, clinging tightly to rocks beneath the icy waters, slowly accumulating its sweetness and chewy texture. The cruelty of nature becomes the cradle of quality. If abalone had grown in gentler seas, perhaps it would never have carried such a distinct identity. That fresh sweetness mingled with the mineral taste of reefs and currents. In other words, the harshness here is the invisible hand that creates value. And when we place that harshness into the economic picture, we see an interesting parallel. The U.S. economy, throughout its long history, has also faced many icy currents such as financial crises, recessions, and global competition. It is precisely these challenges that have forged its inner strength, making the U.S. market both fragile and resilient. Just as abalone can only become a treasure after surviving bone-chilling winters, an economy can only become truly strong after passing through unforgiving cycles without collapsing. Southern Australia, with its cold oceans and storms, has turned the abalone diving trade into a miniature image of resilience. Divers cannot fight nature. They can only learn to listen to it, adapt to it, and find a path among the threats. And within that journey, they have redefined the value of labor. Every kilogram of abalone contains not only the flavor of the ocean, but also an epic of endurance and human willpower. Therefore, when holding in hand an abalone brought from the cold seas of southern Australia to a lavish banquet, we are not merely holding an expensive dish. We are touching the crystallization of a harsh environment, a survival challenge, and a journey written together by nature and humanity. And perhaps it is precisely this that makes abalone not just food, but a symbol of value born from harshness, of beauty forged on the edge of life and death. Technology in the silent hunt. If the harshness of the southern Australian sea is the wall of challenges, then technology is the key that allows humans to pass through without being crushed. Abalone divers, who might seem to rely only on muscle strength and courage, are in fact operating within a sophisticated support system, where every breath and every heartbeat is closely monitored as if they were part of a military campaign under the deep sea. On the surface, the mothership is not simply an anchor point. It resembles a command center, where modern technology sustains the life rhythm of the entire diving team below the water. On the monitoring screen, each slowly moving dot represents the GPS position of a diver. Data about heartbeat, pressure, and remaining oxygen is transmitted in real time. Even a minor irregularity, such as a sudden spike in heart rate or a disrupted signal, immediately triggers a red alert. All of these indicators form the fragile thread that connects the diver to the surface. A thread that, in the world of raging waves and great white sharks, may determine the boundary between returning or remaining forever. Down on the seabed, the diver does not carry large nets or noisy fishing tools. They have only the abalone hook knife, a small but precise instrument, to pry each abalone from the reef. That hook knife is no different from a pen in the hand of an artisan. With just one wrong cut, the abalone shell can break, losing its value. It is this precision of movement that transforms what seems to be purely physical labor into an art, where technology and human skill harmonize. However, the role of technology does not stop at safety and precision. It is also a tool for sustainability. Each mesh bag the diver carries is equipped with an electronic scale, weighing the abalone the moment it is harvested. If one does not meet the standard, it is released back, ensuring the abalone population continues to grow. This is how technology becomes an unspoken law beneath the deep sea, maintaining both human livelihood and the natural rhythm of life. From an economic perspective, this reflects a familiar philosophy in modern management: controlling risk through data. Abalone divers no longer rely solely on instinct. They have an entire technological ecosystem that transforms life and death decisions into choices based on evidence. Just as U.S. financial markets have moved from the era of emotional trading into the age of algorithms and big data, the abalone diving trade has also shed its primitive image to enter the orbit of modernization. What makes technology particularly remarkable here is the combination of silence and survival. It does not flaunt itself like a giant machine, but hides within the smallest details: a pressure sensor strapped to the wrist, a short communication system through an earpiece, a heartbeat signal sent back to the mother ship. Yet it is precisely these silent elements that preserve the lives of the entire team. It is like the invisible infrastructure of an economy. Unseen, but without it, everything collapses. And at the end of the journey, when the mesh bags rise from the sea, filled with abalones precisely weighed, technology once again appears. Data is recorded, the dive is assessed, and all information becomes proof of a transparent production chain. This is how the abalone hunt has stepped out of the shadows of danger to integrate into the light of the modern global economy. Thus, it can be said that technology does not diminish the adventurous nature of abalone diving. On the contrary, it highlights the silent yet brutal essence of this hunt, turning each dive into a symphony between humans and machines, between courage and data. And in a world where risk and value walk hand in hand, technology is the delicate balance that allows humans not only to survive, but also to prevail in the harsh negotiation with the sea. The new current of power. If the previous stage marked Canada's affirmation and stepping into a new order, then now, what matters is not merely building a solid defensive wall or a few scattered strategic agreements, but creating a new current of power, where Canada no longer stands on the sidelines, but becomes an important link in the reshaping global network. What is special about this move is the way Canada does not choose the noisy path of the U.S. or the familiar displays of might that great power politics often indulge in. On the contrary, they act like water, quiet but persistent, skillfully seeping into every gap, every opening in the structure of international power. The post-2025 world, with trade wars that have no end in sight, fractured alliances, and the rise of new powers, is precisely the fertile ground for that current to expand and thrive. One of the key points of this strategy is subtlety in balancing power. Canada clearly understands they cannot, and do not need to, become a military superpower to make the world listen. Instead, they choose the path of soft power, economic diplomacy, sustainable trade, climate commitments, and the role of a trustworthy mediator. That has made Canada emerge as a valuable alternative for many medium and small countries, which are struggling between the two poles of the U.S.-China conflict. But Canada's true strength does not come only from trade agreements or political statements. It lies in the persistence to redefine norms. In a world where the rules of the game seem manipulated by the major powers, the fact that a middle-sized country like Canada steadfastly puts forward new standards, from fair trade, environmental protection, to labor rights, has created a distinctive breeze. Each time Canada signs a new agreement, it is not just another growth figure in an economic report, but the planting of seeds for a more sustainable world order. Perhaps what makes Canada most remarkable is its ability to connect the scattered pieces. They do not directly confront to break old power structures, but choose to weave new networks bit by bit through bilateral, multilateral relations and even international forums that may appear only symbolic. Like a river silently carving a path, at some point the power of persistence will form a current, strong enough to sweep away even the stones that seemed immovable. This also reflects political maturity. Canada has stepped out of America's shadow not through loud declarations of separation, but by itself becoming a pillar for those who want to escape dependence. In Asia, Africa, and Latin America, Canada's image is tied to reliability. A partner that does not impose, does not demand absolute loyalty, but shares interests within a transparent framework. Looking back, it is clear this journey has never been easy. It required Canada to go against the political inertia of decades when every move had to be calculated through the view from Washington. But it is precisely the shift in the international context, where the U.S. is no longer the sole axis, where Europe falls into internal crises, where China faces many challenges, that opened up the space for Canada to self-define. And they did not miss that opportunity. The new current of power that Canada is creating is not noisy, but it is persistent and spreading day by day. In a chaotic world, it is consistency and commitment to long-term values that truly shape the future. And there, Canada is no longer an outsider, but an indispensable part of the global chessboard. Steps on new seas. When Canada had passed through the stages of reacting, asserting, and consolidating, another horizon opened up. Not merely defense or preservation, but the building of a proactive role on the global chessboard. This is the stage where Canada is forced to accept that if it does not know how to swim in the fierce currents of international trade, it will be swept away. And to do that, it must create new seas, places that not only ensure immediate interests, but also define a long-term standing. The special point in this step is a shift in mindset. Canada no longer merely seeks to resist pressure from the U.S. or rely on familiar markets like Europe as a support. They begin to turn toward lands that were never considered priorities, places that seemed distant but hold great potential for eruption. Southeast Asia, Africa, and even South America become new pieces in the trade map Ottawa draws. With young populations, rapidly growing consumer demand, and the aspiration to rise, these regions are like unexplored seas, where whoever arrives first will have the chance to lay down a firm foundation. To achieve this, Canada does not choose noisy approaches, nor does it try to impose. They enter each market with soft steps, bringing green agricultural technology to Africa, sharing sustainable development models with Southeast Asia, or expanding clean energy supply chains in South America. These pieces at first glance may seem fragmented, but in reality are connected by a red thread, building trust and Canada's image as a fair, reliable partner, ready to walk alongside the development of other nations. It is here that Canada's diplomatic capability and trade strategy are most strongly tested. If before, when facing the U.S., Canada needed toughness to survive, then now, when expanding to the world, it needs finesse and long-term vision. A dairy contract in Vietnam, a wind power project in Brazil, or a pledge of technology aid in Kenya. Each action is like a small seed, sown in new soil, not knowing when it will sprout, but certain to yield a harvest in the future. These steps are not without risks, for the further Canada goes from its safe zone, the more it must face fierce competition from other powers. China with its widespread infrastructure investment network, the U.S. with its massive trade power, or the European Union with its experience and sophisticated system of rules. But instead of seeing this as a threat, Canada views it as a challenge to overcome, to prove the mettle of a middle power daring to step out into the open seas. In this journey, the most important thing is not immediate growth numbers, but the persistence with long-term goals. Breaking free from the shadow of the U.S. and building a distinct identity. An identity not only based on defense against pressure, but also on the ability to create and lead new relationships. Canada understands that only when it writes new chapters on the trade map by itself can it sustain and rise in a transforming world order. Steps on new seas are not just a choice, but an inevitable path, because if it does not go, Canada will remain stuck in the whirlpool of dependence. But once it dares to go, dares to try, and dares to bet on the future, Canada will find another kind of strength, the strength of autonomy, of aspiration to rise, and of the belief that even a middle power can redraw the global power map if it knows how to move at the right time and go all the way. The Bridge of Destiny. If Canada's previous efforts had only stopped at protecting its economy and opening new trade routes, then at this stage they began building a bridge of destiny, connecting economic interests with political diplomatic power. This is not merely about signing more trade agreements or expanding the list of markets, but about embedding the nation's development strategy into a global network of connections, where every step is both cautious and bold. On that bridge, one side is Canada's economy, with its strengths in agriculture, clean energy, and high technology. The other side is vast market blocks seeking a reliable partner in an unstable world. And in the middle lies the question of trust. How can Canada be recognized not just as a substitute for the U.S. when needed, but as an independent force with lasting influence? To answer that question, Canada began applying finesse in economic diplomacy. Instead of rushing into noisy confrontations, they chose to knock on each market's door with proposals of mutually beneficial cooperation. Mexico, Europe, Southeast Asia, even economies long familiar with U.S. influence, such as Japan and South Korea, all appeared on the list of target partners. In each place, Canada did not only bring products, but also carried a promise: stability, transparency, and long-term commitment. However, every bridge has difficult spans. More than once, Canada had to face skeptical glances from nations accustomed to seeing them as the smaller sibling under America's shadow. The troubling question always echoed: could Canada truly stand firm if pushed into the storm of trade or politics? To respond, they could not rely solely on words, but had to prove themselves through action, through concrete commitments in agreements, through persistent presence in negotiations, and through clear trade results reflected in numbers. What made this journey compelling was Canada's determination to preserve its own identity. They did not follow the path of imposing diplomacy often practiced by superpowers, nor did they allow themselves to become a new dependent. Instead, Canada chose the role of the builder, quietly laying each brick on the bridge of connection, creating a path where economic interests walk side by side with human values, from climate change, trade equality, to social justice. And precisely in that difference, Canada gradually affirmed its special role: a nation large enough to exert influence, yet small enough to understand the concerns of other medium-sized countries. In a world divided by great power competition, Canada became a bridge, not only between economies, but also between development models, between a past of dependence and a future of independence. As they step onto this bridge of destiny, Canada knows there is no turning back. Each step forward is an affirmation, each agreement a span completed. And once that bridge is fully built, Canada will not only break free from America's shadow, but also secure for itself a worthy place in the new global picture, where they are both a player and a creator of the rules.